Hello, guys and gals, and this is part 9 of our reading of Alfred Hitchcock Presents Stories Not for the Nervous. And we're going to go over the copyright information, which should be on the screen right now. It clearly says here the author gratefully acknowledges the invaluable assistance of Robert Arthur in the preparation of this volume. There we have all of the copyright information, all the copyright dates, and all the publication histories. And so, yeah. We are going to also go over the acknowledgments, but I'm not going to read them aloud. They will be on the screen. Okay, anyways, there was, in the last part, we were reading The Dog Died First. It's a novelette by Bruno Fischer. And, it appears that Dot may have killed, she said that she ran over a dog, but then this guy ended up dead. And the attorney thinks that he can get her off the charge. But anyways, we're gonna see. This has really been an interesting story. After a minute, she slipped out of my embrace. "I'd like a cigarette, darling," she said. I lit it for her, and she sat down and crossed her legs and drew smoke into her lungs. "Darling," she said then, "they're saying terrible things about me." She sounded indignant, not frightened, not broken up, but merely outraged, and that she should be accused of having done anything wrong. "They're even saying that Emmett was my lover," she went on angrily. "Was he?" When the words were out of my mouth, I hated myself for saying them, but I had to know. Her eyebrows arched. "Darling, you don't think that too?" "Was he, Dot?" "Certainly not." Again, the vast indignation. "Emmett meant little to me, even when I went out a few times with him. Before I married you." I bent over her and took her face between my hands and looked deeply into her blue eyes. They were grave and without deceit. "Dot," I said, "did you kill him?" "No." "How did the blood get in the car?" "From the dog I ran over." "But police science has proven that a man and not a dog had bled in the car." It didn't make sense that she would tell the truth about everything but that. It was all for one piece. It was all of one piece. Frantically, I wanted to believe her, but deep inside of me, I didn't know. I straightened up. She was my wife, and I loved her. "Well, we'll fight them," I said. When I returned to the district attorney's office, the same 3 men were there waiting for me. Well, is it a deal?" Fair asked. "No," I said. Ricardo sighed. Fair pounded the desk. "Very well. It will be first-degree murder, then." I turned away. George followed me out of the office and put his hand on my shoulder. "We've got a good chance to lick them," he said. "I don't think, at any rate, that Fair can get a jury to give her the chair." Fair. I don't think that Fair can get the jury to give her the chair. "We may get away with temporary insanity if she'll cooperate. I'll tell her exactly what to say at the stand, and if she sticks to it, she's innocent," I said, and walked away. I was running away from his legal logic, and I couldn't run away from my hellish doubts. Emmett Walker had an eye for pretty women, but he had married an unattractive one. He hadn't done well as an insurance agent. Frantically, being the husband of a woman with a fat bank account had paid off better. Ida Walker was dumpy, and she had a face to match. When she admitted me into the house, she didn't give the impression of a grieving widow. She was frank about it. "I'm not a fool," she told me. "I'm aware of Emmett. I was aware that Emmett was constantly betraying me." "With Dot?" I asked, looking down at the carpet. Ida's voice was gentle. "No, Bernie, I never expected Dot." Then she added, "But a wife is the last to know." Or a husband, I thought, and the silence that followed was more embarrassing for me than for her. After a minute, I asked her what time Emmett had been supposed to call for her last night. He wasn't definite, I just said. He told me he had work to do at the office, and at 8:30 dropped me off at Marie's in the car. He said he would try to be back before 10 to watch a prize fight on the Cannon's television set. At 1 o'clock, I gave up waiting for him and called George. I gave up waiting for him, and George drove me home. Weren't you worried when Emmett didn't show up? Worried? Ida Walker's lips curled. Not worried, in the way you mean. I assumed that he was with another woman. Then the police got me out of bed and told me that he was dead. I stood up, and Ida accompanied me to the door. I'm a lot sorrier for Dot than for Emmett, she said. He deserved what he got. That devil had a way with women. Even I could forgive him a lot. I was willing to accept crumbs from him, but I don't regret that he's gone. I wondered how much she had forgiven him in the end. Edith Bauer was Dot's best friend. She was a high-strung, delicately formed woman whose figure would be a delight. Here we are. In porcelain. When I told her that Dot had been charged with first-degree murder, she burst into tears. Her husband was there. Herman lived close enough to the high school, where he taught science, to walk home from lunch, and I found them seated at the dinette table. After Edith dried her eyes, she asked me if I would care to have a bite with them. I shook my head. I had no desire that morning for anything but coffee. I sat at the table with them and asked Edith if any of the four women at the bridge game last night had left for any length of time. You mean left the house? She said, frowning at the question. At least left the room. Not for more than a minute or two, Edith replied. We four were playing bridge all the time, for about a 8:45 until almost 1 o'clock, when we broke off. Of course, we took time off for a snack, but we were all in the same room. Who served refreshments? Marie, naturally, but she didn't have to leave the house to do that. How could you start playing at 8:45 when Dot didn't arrive until after 9? George Cannon made the fourth, she said. He wasn't anxious to play, and when Dot arrived, he gave up his seat for her and went down to the basement to work with his tools. Cabinet making is his hobby, and he showed us the record cabinet he's building out of a bleached oak. It was one of the most attractive. She broke off. How can I talk about furniture at a time like this? She wailed and started to sniffle. I turned my attention to Herman, whose chubby face was thoughtful as he chewed his food. Where were you last night, Herman? I asked. Home alone, catching up on my reading. He scooped up a slice of tomato from his plate. Why is that so important? Because, I said carefully, Dot wasn't the only woman at the bridge game who used to go out with Emmett Walker. Meaning me, Edith said. I had quite a crush on Emmett when I was a kid. She rose quickly, too quickly, it seemed to me, to go out of the kitchen for the coffee pot. Herman had his fork pointed in midair, and he studied me over it. What are you getting at, Bernie? I'm not sure, I muttered. And that was the truth. I was groping in the dark, trying to veer guilt away from Dot to someone else, anyone else. I went to see Marie Cannon. Marie was a full-bodied, slow-moving woman who caught and held men's eyes when prettier women were ignored. The housecoat she wore had a tight, high waist and a wide, low neckline. that accentuated lushness. A handkerchief was balled in her fist, and like Edith Bauer, she wept at the sight of me, for she too was a close friend of Dot's. I can't imagine Dot killing someone in cold blood, she said. It must have been an accident or temporary insanity. I didn't argue. I had come to ask questions, and my first one was whether Dot had been greatly upset when she had arrived that last night. Marie thought it over. She seemed somewhat out of breath, but that was all. George played out the hand before he gave up his seat for her. And as she waited, she rather calmly told us that she had run over a dog. Marie unclasped her hands to stare at her moist handkerchief. George is afraid that the fact that she had a story about killing a dog all prepared before she got here will sound bad before a jury. Somebody came down the stairs. Marie and I turned our heads as George entered the room. He wore a faded bathrobe and flapping slippers. I came home for a nap, he explained. I had only a couple of hours sleep last night when your phone call woke me. He looked at me. You could use some sleep too, Bernie. Sleep? Could there be any sleep for me while Dot was shut away by four walls? Why would Dot have said she left a dead dog in the spot where she left the body? I said. If she killed Emmett, she would have known that his body would have been found there instead. George shrugged. She was aware that Wilcox had seen her come out of the house, and then when the body was found, Wilcox would put two and two together. She was frantic. Marie said she didn't seem very frantic when she arrived here a few minutes later. No, she didn't, George agreed, but it's hard to tell with a woman like Dot. She's always breathless and bubbly and excited anyways, and well, Bernie, she's lovely and charming, but her mind jumps about. I mean, that far-fetched story about a dog might have seemed like a valid explanation to her at the time, but she isn't exactly a logical person. Not at all logical, I thought, and her flightiness used to annoy me. Now it might mean her death or imprisonment. Suddenly, I was so tired that I could hardly stand. I leaned against the television cabinet, and I remembered that it was on that screen Emmett Walker had intended to see a prize fight last night, or so Ida had told me. I said, the one who had most reason to kill Emmett Walker was his wife. Marie sat down abruptly. Yes, she whispered. You mean before she got here last night? It's possible, I said. By the way, where was Emmett's car found? At his house, George replied. The police believe that he returned home after driving Ida here, and then Dot picked him up in her car. He shook his head. I've considered every angle too, Bernie, but they all lead to Walker's blood in your car and Dot's preposterous story about a dog. I wasn't being illogical either. I looked at Marie, who was opening her handkerchief to blow her nose, and at George, who tightened his lips glumly. I'll do my best to save her, George said. The odds are that she can be got off within the law. Odds, like gambling, gambling against whether she would die or spend long years in jail or be released with the stigma of blood on her hands. There was pity in their eyes. Pity for me, as well as for Dot. I could not stand it, and I said goodbye and got out of there. Sometimes, when I was worn out from a day of teaching and wanted quiet to read the paper, Dot's incessant and meaningless chatter would irritate me. Now the absence of her voice made the house terribly empty. I'd come back home, but I couldn't endure being there without Dot. I was about to leave when the doorbell rang. A 10-year-old boy stood there. Larry Robbins, son of the druggist who lived on... Oh no. A 10-year-old boy stood there, Larry Robbins, son of the druggist who lived on the next block. "Mr. Hall," he said, "have you seen a little black dog?" I stared at him. "He got lost," the boy said. "I let him out for a few minutes last night and he never came back, so I'm asking all the neighbors if they saw him. Did you, Mr. Hall?" With an effort to keep my voice calm, "What did he look like?" "A little thing about so big, all black except for a white spot over his nose and white paws. I got him over last week. My uncle gave him to me, and we didn't get a collar for him yet or a license. Maybe somebody thought he was a stray, fed him, and took him in." "What time did you let him out last night?" "It was after 8 o'clock. You didn't see him, did you?" "Thanks, Larry," I said, and patted him on the head. He blinked at me. Thank you for what, Mr. Hall?" "Never mind," I said, and added, "No, I didn't see your dog, Larry." A couple of hours later, a small bulldozer I had hired arrived near the intersection of Pine Road and Wilson Lane. I'd been waiting there for some time. When the bulldozer had trundled off the truck, I told the driver where to start digging. Then I drove to the nearest phone and called Detective Ricardo at the police headquarters. "Can you come right away to where Emmett Walker's body was found last night?" I said. You got something, Mr. Hall?" "I don't know," I said. "But if I have, I want you to be here as a witness." I hurried back to where the bulldozer was plowing up a 50-foot wide area that started at the bushes along the road. Though he'd dug some 3 feet deep and 20 feet into the field beyond, he had so far turned up nothing but boulders. I walked beside the bulldozer blade, my feet sinking into the loose, upturned dirt. The scooped out area doubled in size before Ricardo showed up. His fat hips waddled as he stumbled over the chewed up ground. He brooded at the crawling, buckling bulldozer and sighed. "Faith moves mountains, eh, Mr. Hall?" he commented dryly. I told him about Larry Robbins' lost dog. "So why didn't you come to the police and let them do the digging?" he demanded. "Because there'd be too much red tape before I got them to move, if they moved at all." Ricardo scratched his jowls reflectively. "This field belongs to Gridley. He wouldn't like what you're doing to it. I obtained his permission. I'm paying him, and promised to have it leveled off after." The driver yelled as he climbed off the seat. Ricardo and I ran towards him. There on the ground, half covered in dirt, was a patch of black fur. It was some 50 feet back in an almost straight line from where Walker's body had been found. Ricardo stooped, brushed dirt away from the fur, pulled the dead animal out into the clear by one of its legs. I had never before seen the little black dog, but I had heard it described by both Dot and Larry Robbins. Dot hadn't had a logical mind. She had only told the truth. Suddenly, I was feeling fine. I had never felt better in my life. "Do you believe now that my wife ran over a dog?" Ricardo straightened up and dusted his hands. Why should I?" "Why?" I stammered from sheer incredulousness. "Don't you believe what you see?" "I see a dead dog, all right, but there are at least 2 things this dog didn't do. He didn't bleed in your car, and he didn't leave Walker's body in the bushes. I think I know how the dog got here. He was buried by the murderer." Ricardo smiled thinly. That's what you'd like us to think. Early this morning, after you left police headquarters, you decided to try and save your wife by making her cockeyed yarn seem true. You found a little black dog and killed it and buried it here. You were pretending to find it. Then you pretended to find it." The bulldozer driver was listening open-mouthed. As for me, bitter anger was was replaced. Oh, had replaced my elation. Are you going to have this dog examined? Sure, Mr. Hall, though it probably won't be possible to tell if a car or a club killed it. There's nothing to be said. Oh, there was nothing to be said. The finding of the dead dog proved everything to me and nothing to the detective. I told the bulldozer driver to shove back the dirt he had scooped out and walked to my car. Oh, and walked to my car. The car had been returned to me a few hours ago by the police with the bloody floor rug missing. Ricardo moved at my side. I guess I do about the same thing for my wife, he said sympathetically, but I'd be smarter. I whirled at the edge of the road to face him. So you're smart, but not smart enough to see that a story can sound so far-fetched that it has to be true. My wife isn't quite the fool all of you make her out to be. Ricardo had no comment for a long moment, and his sad black eyes were reflective. He wasn't a bad guy, I thought. Not one of those bullying, blustering cops. He was trying to do what seemed to him the right thing. You know, he mused, looking back at the splotch of black fur in the field, there's another answer if your wife's story about the dog is true. It's about time you saw it. Suddenly, he grinned at me. You wait here. I have to take the dog's body. It might be evidence. He waddled over the chewed-up field, and it struck me that I could accomplish more than a policeman could, and by the time he caught up with me, I could hand him something. I got into my car and drove off. Marie Cannon came to the door. Those harsh, stricken lines in the corners of her eyes and mouth had deepened within a few hours. George isn't home, she said. I'm here to see you, I said. She let me into the living room. She sat down, keeping her full-fleshed body stiff. I stood over her. Marie, you've been weeping all day for Emmett Walker. She brought the handkerchief to her nose. Of course, I'm sorry he's dead. He was a friend. A friend and a lover, I said. And maybe you're weeping a little for Dot, too. Or for your own conscience. Because you know that Dot is innocent. You know that Emmett was alive at around 10 o'clock, which meant that Dot couldn't have killed him. I heard a car pull into the driveway at the side of the house. Ricardo, I thought, right at my heels. I hoped that he would have sense enough to let me handle Marie. No, Marie was saying. We found the dog buried near where Emmett Walker's body was found, I told her. That proves Dot's story, and it proves that one of the people who was in this house last night killed him. They were the only ones who knew where Dot had left the dead dog. There was a whisper of feet on the porch, then silence. That meant that Ricardo was playing along with me. He was letting me break down Marie while he listened through the open window. Marie was sniffling into the handkerchief. This is what must have happened, I went on. Last night, you went into the kitchen to prepare refreshments. Through the window, you saw Emmett Walker arrive to watch the fight on your television. You slipped out through the kitchen door to talk to him. I didn't kill him, she burst out. Leave me alone. Let me alone. You didn't kill him, I agreed. None of you 4 women in the house could have, because none of you was out of the house long enough to drive the body away. But there was a 5th person in the house, your husband. Now beside the edge of the curtain on one of the 2 windows looking out on the porch, I could see a man's hip. Ricardo was taking it all in. No, Marie was wailing. No. Yes, I said. It's the only possible way it could have happened. George was in the basement making a record cabinet. I've been down there a number of times. There's a ground level window looking out the side of the house. George saw you run out and meet Emmett. Maybe you kissed Emmett. Maybe you arranged a meeting with him. Then you returned to the kitchen and took the refreshments out to your guests. Emmett lingered outside so as not to enter the house at the same time you did, and give his wife ideas. And George came out of the basement through the garage door, and in his hand he held a hammer, or whatever heavy tool he snatched up from his workbench. Marie wept. In a minute she knew she would be talking for Ricardo to hear. Oh. I glanced toward the window and saw that Ricardo had shifted his position, and that considerably more than his hip was now visible. Only it wasn't Ricardo. The detective had a full paunch, a padded hip. This man out there was thin and frail, George Cannon, who had seen my car parked out front of the house and had come up on the porch quietly. All right, let him hear. Maybe he would break down when Marie did, or he would flee, and that would be the good confession. I turned back to Marie. So George killed Emmett Walker in blind jealous fury. Then there he was, with a murdered man on his hands. He had heard Dot tell that she had run over a dog, and where she had left it. She saw how he could divert suspicion wholly from himself by shoving it all on Dot. He dragged the body into Dot's car, and the battered head bleeding on the floor rug, fitted in with his scheme. He drove to where Dot had said she'd left the dog. He found it and buried it in the field behind the bushes and left Emmett's body there. He returned and drove Emmett's car to Emmett's house and walked back. The whole business had taken some time, but you women playing cards didn't know he was gone. Maybe he left one of his machine tools running so that you heard it upstairs and assumed he was in the basement. Oh. Well, we are getting close to the end here. We're going to finish this story up in the next one. If you like this content, and we've been reading from Alfred Hitchcock Presents, Stories Not for the Nervous, but specifically The Dog Died First by Bruno Fischer. Now, if you like this content, then make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload. Also, if you want to support me in any way, or if you want to join the Discord server, all that information will be in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.